Perak Hey, Hamocher es Hasfina Machar es HaToren, Ves HaNes, Ves HaOgin, Ves Kol, Hamenhigin Osa Aval Lo, Machar Lo es Havadim Velo es Hamartzufin Velo es Ha'antiki, Uvizman She'amar Lohi, V'choma, Shebsocha Harechulan Mechurin, Machar es HaKaron, Lo Machar es Haprados, Machar es Haprados, Lo Machar es Hakaron, Machar es Hatzemed, Lo Machar es Habakar, Machar es Habakar, Lo Machar es Hatzemed, Reb Yehuda Omer Hadamim Modin, Ketzad Amar Lo Machar, Li Tzimdecha, V'masayim Zuz, Hadavar Yadua She'ein Hatzemed, V'masayim Zuz, V'chachamim Omrim Ein Hadamim Raya. One who sells the ship has sold along with the taurine and the nace and the ogin and all the equipment that is used for directing it. But he has not sold the avadim who serve as oarsmen, nor the packing bags that are used for transporting goods, nor the antique on the ship. And when one said to the buyer, "You're purchasing it, the ship," and when one said to the buyer, "You're purchasing it, the ship, and all that it contains," all of these latter elements are also sold. One who sold a wagon, Hakaron, has not sold the mules that pull the wagon. Similarly, if one sold the mules, he has not sold the wagon. One who sold a yoke, Hahatzemed, has not sold the oxen, and one who sold the oxen has not sold the yoke. Rabbi Yehuda says the sum of money indicates what one has sold. How so? If the buyer said to the seller, "Sell me your yoke for 200 dinars," since it's a known matter that a yoke is not sold for 200 dinars, he clearly intended to purchase the oxen as well. And the rabbis say the sum of money is not proof. Hamocher es hachamor lo machar kelav. Nachum Hamadi Omer machar kelav. Reb Yehuda Omer pamim mechurin upamim einan mechurin. Ketzad hayachamor lefana v'chelav alav va'amar lo machar li chamorecha ze harechelav mechurin. Chamorecha hu ein kelav mechurin. One who sells a donkey has not sold its vessels, i.e. its equipment with it. Nachum the Mede says he has sold its vessels. Rabbi Yehuda says there are times when the vessels are sold and there are times when they're not sold. How so? If the donkey was before him and its vessels were on it, and the buyer said to him, "Sell me this donkey of yours, its vessels are sold." If the buyer said to him, "Is the donkey yours? I wish to purchase it, its vessels are not sold." Hamocher es hachamor, macher es hasyach, Machar es hapara, lo machar es habina, machar ashpa, machar zivla, machar bor, machar memav, machar kaveres, machar devorin, machar shovach, machar yonim, halokeach pero shovach mechavero, mafriach brecha rishona, peros, kaveres, notel shlosha nechilin, Umsares, chalos devash, maniach shte chalos, zeisim lakots, maniach shte grofios. One who sells a female donkey has sold its foal along with it. But one who sold a cow has not sold its young. One who sold a dunghill has sold its manure. One who sold a cistern has sold its water. One who sold a beehive has sold the bees in it, and likewise one who sold a dovecote has sold the doves. One who buys the produce of a dovecote from another, i.e. the doves that will hatch over the course of the year in a dovecote, must leave mafriach, the first pair of doves, from the brood for the seller. If one buys the produce of a beehive, i.e. all the bees produced from a beehive over the course of the year, and the buyer takes 3 swarms, and then the seller renders the bees impotent so that they will stop producing offspring and instead produce only honey, one who buys honeycombs must leave 2 combs. If one buys olive trees for felling, he must leave 2 shoots for the seller. Hanoke shnei ilanos besoch sadeh chaveiro hareze lo kana karka. Rabbi Meir Omer kana karka higdilu lo yeshape haola min hageza shelo umin hasharashim al baal hakarka vim mesu ein lo karka kana shlosha kana karka Higdilu Yishape V'ha'ola min Hageza Umin Hashrashin Shalo Vim Mesu Yeshlo Karka. With regard to one who buys 2 trees in the field of another, this one has not acquired any ground but only the trees. Rabbi Meir says he has acquired the ground under them. The Mishnah states a halacha in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana. If the trees grew, the owner of the field may not cut down their branches despite the fact that the shade damages his field. And that which grows out of the trunk is his, i.e., it belongs to the owner of the tree, but that which grows out of the roots belongs to the owner of the ground. And if the trees died, their owner has no rights to the ground before the trees had stood. If one bought 3 trees, he has acquired the ground along with them. If they grew, the owner of the field may cut down their branches, as he has sold a specific piece of land along with the trees, not his entire field. And that which grows out of the trunk and out of the roots is his, i.e., it belongs to the owner of the trees. And if the trees died, the owner of the trees still has possession of the ground, as it was sold with the trees. Hamocher rosh behema gasa lo machar es haraglayim machar es haraglayim lo machar es harosh machar es hakane lo machar es hakaved machar es hakaved lo machar es hakane avol badaka machar es harosh machar es haraglayim machar es haraglayim lo machar es harosh machar es hakane machar es hakaved machar es hakaved lo machar es hakane. One who sells the head of a large domesticated animal has not sold it along with it the 4 legs, as each part is considered important in its own right. All the more so if one sold the 4 legs, he has not sold the head. Similarly, if one sold the windpipe and the lungs, he has not sold the liver, despite the fact that they are sometimes attached, and if he sold the liver, he has not sold the windpipe and lungs. But in the case of small domesticated animals, if one sold the head, he has sold the 4 legs, although if one sold the legs, he has not sold the head. Likewise, if one sold the windpipe and lungs, he has sold the liver, but if he has sold the liver, he has not sold the windpipe and lungs. Arba midos, b'mochrin, machar lo chitim, yafos, v'nimtzu raos, halokeach yachol lachazor bo, raos v'nimtzu yafos, mocher yachol lachazor bo, raos v'nimtzu raos, yafos v'nimtzu yafos, ein echad mehem, yachol lachazor bo, Shechamtis v'nimseis levana levana v'nimseis shechamtis etzim shel zayis v'nimsu shel shikma v'nimsu shel zayis yayin v'nimsa chometz v'nimsa yayin shnehem yecholin lechaza behem. There are 4 basic cases with regard to sellers and buyers. If the seller sold him wheat and said that the wheat was good and it's found to be bad, the buyer but not the seller can renege on the sale. If the seller sold him what he thought was bad wheat and it's found to be good, the seller can renege on the sale, but the buyer cannot. If he sold bad wheat and it's found to be bad, or good wheat and it's found to be good, neither one of them can renege on the sale, as the condition of the sale was met. If a seller sold reddish-brown wheat and it's found to be white, or white wheat and it's found to be reddish-brown, similarly if he sold olive wood and it's found to be wood of a sycamore, or if he sold wood of a sycamore and it's found to be wood of an olive tree, or if the seller sold him wine and it's found to be vinegar, or vinegar and it's found to be wine, in all these cases both the seller and the buyer can renege on the sale. Since the sale was for a different item than that which was delivered, the transaction can be nullified even if there was no mistake with regard to the price. Hamocher peiros lechaveiro mashach v'lo madad kana madad v'lo mashach lo kana im haya fikeach socher es makoman halokeach pishtan mechaveiro harezel lo kana ad shetatlenu mimakom lemakom vim haya vim chubar lekarka v'salash kol shehu kana. This Mishnah discusses several methods of acquiring movable property. With regard to one who sells produce to another, if the buyer pulled the produce but did not measure it, he has acquired the produce through the act of acquisition of pulling. If he measured the produce but did not pull it, he has not acquired it, and either the seller or the buyer can decide to rescind the sale. If the buyer is perspicacious and wants to acquire the produce without having to pull it, and he wishes to do so before the seller could change his mind and decide not to sell, he rents its place where the produce is located, and his property immediately affects acquisition of the produce on his behalf. With regard to one who buys flax from another, because flax is usually carried around, this purchaser has not acquired it until he carries it from place to place and acquires it by means of the act of acquisition of lifting. Pulling the flax is ineffective. And if it was attached to the ground and he detached any amount, he has acquired it, as the Gemara will explain. Hamocher yayin v'shemen lechaveiro v'hukru'o shehuzlu im ad shelo nismala hamida lemochar Mishanismala hamida lokeach vimhaya sarsur benehem nishbara hechavis nishbara lasarsur v'chayav lahatif lo shalosh tipin hirkina amitza harehu shel mocher henvani Eino chayev lahatif shalosh tipin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer erev Shabbos im chashecha potter. With regard to one who sells food or drink that has an established price, such as wine or oil, to another, and the price rises or falls, and the buyer or the seller wishes to renege on the sale, if the price changed before the measuring vessel is filled, the merchandise still belongs to the seller, and he can cancel the sale. Once the measuring vessel is filled, the merchandise belongs to the buyer, and the seller can no longer cancel the sale. And if there was a middleman, a sarsur between them, and the barrel belonging to the middleman, being used to measure the merchandise, broke during the transaction, and the merchandise is ruined, it broke for the middleman, i.e. he is responsible for the ruined merchandise. The Mishnah teaches an additional halacha with regard to sales, and anyone who sells wine, oil, or similar liquids is obligated, after he transfers the liquid into the buyer's vessel, to drip for him 3 extra drops from the measure. After he drips those 3 drops, if he turned the barrel on its side and drained out the last bits of liquid that it contained, this belongs to the seller, and he is not required to give these last drops to the buyer. And a storekeeper is not obligated to drip 3 drops because he is too busy to do this constantly. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the sale occurs on Shabbat Eve as nightfall arrives, one is exempt from dripping these 3 drops, as there is a need to complete the transaction before Shabbat begins. Hasholeach espeno etzel chenvani Ufundion biado umada lo beisar shemen v'nasan lo es ha'isar shavar es hatzlochis v'ibed es ha'isar chenvani chayav Rabbi Yehuda poter she'al menas ken shlacho umodim chachamim l'Rabbi Yehuda bizman shehatzlochis biyad hatinok umadad chenvani l'socha chenvani poter. With regard to one who sends his son to a storekeeper with a punyon, a coin worth 2 isar, in his hand, and this storekeeper measured oil for him for 1 isar and gave him the 2nd isar as change, and the son broke the jug and lost the isar, the storekeeper must compensate the father, as he gave the jug and coin to one who is not halachically competent. Rabbi Yehuda exempts him from liability, as he holds that the father sent his son in order to do this, i.e. to bring back the jug and coin. And the rabbis concede to Rabbi Yehuda with regard to a case where the jug is in the hand of the child and the storekeeper measured the oil into it. The storekeeper is exempt if the child breaks the jug. Hasiton mekaneach midosav achas l'shloshim yom uval abayis achas l'shneim asar chodesh. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer chiluk hadvarim chenvani mekaneach midosav pamayim b'shabos umache mishklosa pam achas b'shabos umnakeach umkaneach ma'oznayim al kol mishkal. A wholesaler, a hasiton, must clean his measuring vessels, which are used for measuring liquids such as oil and wine, once every 30 days, because the residue of the liquid sticks to the measure and reduces its capacity. And a homeowner who sells his goods must clean his measuring vessels only once every 12 months. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the matters are reversed. In the case of one who is constantly using his vessels for selling merchandise, the residue does not adhere to the merchandising vessel, and therefore a wholesaler must clean his measures only once a year. But in the case of a homeowner who does not sell as often, the residue adheres to the measuring vessel, therefore he must clean them every 30 days. A storekeeper who constantly sells merchandise in small quantities cleans his measuring vessels twice a week and cleans his weights once a week, and he cleans the pans of his scales after each and every weighing to ensure that no merchandise is adhered to the pans, thereby increasing their weight. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Bame Devar Mamurim, Balach, Avol, V'yabesh, Eino Tzarich, V'chayev, L'chachriya, Lo Tefach, Hayashoka, Lo Ayin Ba'ayin, No Sein Lo, Gerumav, Echa Lasara, Balach Ve'echa Le'esrim, B'yavesh Makom, Shenagu, Lamod Badaka, Lo Yamod Bagasa, Bagasa Lo Yamod Badaka, Limchok Lo Yigdosh, Ligdosh Lo Yimchok. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, in what case is this statement that it's necessary to clean a measuring vessel said? With regard to moist items which are likely to adhere to the measuring vessels. But with regard to dry goods which do not adhere to the measuring vessels, one does not need to clean his measuring